Captain Daeho Kim stood on the bridge of the Persistence, staring at the massive structure floating in space before them. The thing was bigger than any city on Earth. Strange lights moved across its surface like tiny stars, and ships of all shapes and sizes flew around it like insects around a lamp. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures from over 300 different sources," said Boram Park from her position at the engineering console. Her fingers danced over the controls as she tried to make sense of what they were seeing. "This is unlike anything we've ever encountered." Daeho nodded slowly. 3 months ago, Earth's deep space sensors had picked up these signals coming from the center of the galaxy. The energy readings were so powerful that scientists thought it might be a black hole acting strangely. But as they studied the patterns, they realized something else was happening. The signals were too organized, too purposeful to be natural. "Hey Jin, what do you think?" Daeho asked, turning to the ship's xenobiologist. Dr. Heijin Lee looked up from her scanner readings, her face pale with excitement and worry. "Captain, if these readings are correct, there are hundreds of different life forms in there. Different species, different technologies. This isn't just a space station, it's like a meeting place for the entire galaxy." Woo-Sung Choi, the ship's tactical officer, frowned at his displays. "Sir, I'm detecting some kind of barrier around the station. Energy fields, defensive systems. Whatever is happening in there, they don't want visitors." The Persistence was humanity's first faster-than-light ship. It had taken 50 years to build after scientists figured out how to bend space itself. The crew of 42 people represented the best Earth had to offer. They were explorers, scientists, and diplomats all rolled into one. Their mission was simple: find out if humans were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was bigger than anyone had imagined. "Captain," said Yanwu Shin from the communication station, "I'm picking up transmissions from the station, multiple languages, but the computer is starting to translate some of them. It sounds like a government meeting of some kind." Aho walked over to look at the translation attempts scrolling across Yanwu's screen. Words like territory, expansion, voting, and council appeared again and again. Whatever was happening inside that massive structure, it was important. "Sir," Boram called out, "I think I can get us through their barrier. The energy pattern has gaps that cycle every few minutes. If we time it right and modify our shields, we might be able to slip through." "That sounds dangerous," Heijin said. "We don't know what those barriers are for. Maybe they're keeping something in, not just keeping others out." Woo-Sung checked his weapons systems, though he knew they would be useless against something this large. "Captain, if we go in there, we might not be able to get back out. And if there are hundreds of alien species inside, they might not be happy to see us." Daeho considered their options. They could turn around and go back to Earth with news that aliens existed. That would be the safe choice. But they still wouldn't know anything about these beings or what they were planning. The signals they had followed here suggested this meeting was important. Maybe the most important thing happening in the galaxy right now. "We didn't come all this way just to look through a window," Daeho decided. "Boram, prepare to take us through that barrier. Everyone else get ready for anything." The next 20 minutes were tense as Boram worked her magic with the ship's systems. She rerouted power from non-essential systems to the shields and modified their frequency to match the gaps she had found in the alien barrier. The Persistence crept closer to the massive station, waiting for the perfect moment. "Now!" Boram shouted. The ship surged forward, slipping through the energy barrier like a needle through cloth. Alarms immediately started ringing throughout the alien station. Lights flashed, and the small ships flying around the structure began moving toward them. "Where do we land this thing?" Woo-Sung asked, watching dozens of alien vessels heading their way. "There," Heijin pointed to a large opening in the side of the station. "That looks like a docking bay." But Daeho shook his head. "Too obvious, they'll trap us there." He studied the structure for a moment. "There, that looks like a main hall. Big enough for our ship, and if it's what I think it is, we'll make quite an entrance." Boram's eyes widened. "Captain, you want to crash through their roof?" "Not crash. Make an entrance. Can you do it without hurting anyone?" "I can try, but I can't promise we won't break a few things." "Do it." The Persistence turned toward what looked like a massive dome on top of the station. Scans showed it was some kind of transparent material, probably covering a large meeting space. Through it, they could see thousands of different creatures gathered in what looked like an enormous amphitheater. Breakthrough in 3, 2, 1. The ship's modified shields cut through the dome material like it was paper. The Persistence dropped into the chamber, landing with a thunderous crash in the center of the vast space. Smoke and debris filled the air as the ship's engines powered down. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then chaos erupted. Thousands of alien beings began making sounds that the computer couldn't translate, probably screaming, shouting, or calling for help. Some creatures that looked like giant crystals flashed with angry red light. Others that seemed to be made of energy itself began pulsing rapidly. A group of insect-like beings buzzed their wings so loudly it sounded like a thunderstorm. "Well," Yanwu said, looking at his screens full of panicked alien communications, "I think we have their attention." Daeho stood up and straightened, his uniform. "Open the main airlock, let's go introduce ourselves." "Sir, are you sure that's wise?" Heijin asked. "We don't know if the atmosphere is safe or if these beings are hostile. The air is fine according to our sensors, and if they're hostile, hiding in the ship won't help us much." Daeho headed toward the exit. "Besides, we're already here. Might as well be polite about it." The airlock opened with a hiss, and Daeho stepped out onto a ramp that extended to the floor of the great chamber. Behind him came Yanwu with a translation device, Haijin with her scientific equipment, and Wusung keeping watch for threats. The chamber was even more impressive from the inside. It was huge enough to hold a small city, with curved walls that rose up to where their ship had broken through the dome. Thousands of different beings sat in organized sections, all staring at the humans with expressions that ranged from curiosity to terror to anger. Daeho raised his hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Greetings," he said clearly, letting the translation device broadcast in multiple frequencies. "We are humans from the planet Earth. We come in peace and apologize for the dramatic entrance." A creature that looked like a living tree stepped forward from a group of what appeared to be the chamber's leaders. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through leaves, but the translator turned it into words. "You have violated sacred space during the most important council session in 10,000 years. You have bypassed security that has never been breached. You have brought weapons into a place of peace. Who are you, and how is this possible?" Daeho looked back at his crew, then at the thousands of alien faces staring at them. He realized they had stumbled into something much bigger than first contact with another species. They had crashed into the government of the entire galaxy. "We are explorers," he said simply. "We detected your signals and came to investigate. We had no idea we were interrupting anything important." The tree-like being made a sound like branches, breaking. Other aliens began making their own noises of disbelief or anger. The computer was picking up fragments of different conversations, most of them focused on one impossible fact. Humans had done something no other species in the galaxy had ever managed to do, and nobody knew what that meant for the future of everyone involved. 6 months after the meeting with the Sovereign, the galaxy was experiencing changes that no one could have predicted. Captain Daeho stood in the command center of humanity's newest space station, watching reports flow in from across known space. The transformation was chaotic, dangerous, and absolutely magnificent. "Captain, we're getting another request for human advisors," said Si-Jin Park, Earth's new galactic representative. "The Crystalline Confederacy wants help redesigning their transportation systems. Apparently they've been using the same technology for 50,000 years and just realized there might be better ways to do things." Daeho smiled as he reviewed the request. It was the 15th such message this week. Ever since the Sovereign had announced its decision to step back from direct control of galactic civilization, species across the galaxy had begun questioning everything they had taken for granted. The transition hadn't been smooth. 3 major wars had broken out in the first month as different species tested boundaries that had been fixed for millions of years. Several civilizations had attempted to expand beyond their traditional territories, leading to conflicts that the old council system would have prevented. But something interesting had happened. Instead of escalating into galaxy-wide destruction, these conflicts had forced the involved species to develop new diplomatic solutions. Without the sovereigns' predetermined patterns to follow, they were learning to negotiate, compromise, and innovate on their own. "How are the Pioneer Corps assignments going?" Daeho asked. Dr. Haejin Lee looked up from her data displays. "Better than expected. We've got teams on 47 different worlds now, and the results are fascinating. When species are free to experiment with new approaches, they come up with solutions that no one anticipated." The Pioneer Corps had been Young Ho Bayek's idea. Instead of trying to control the chaos that followed the sovereign's withdrawal, humanity would serve as catalysts, helping other species explore new possibilities while learning from their unique perspectives and approaches. "The Vaethis have developed a new form of biotechnology that grows living buildings," Haejin continued. "The Korth Collective has split into smaller groups that are experimenting with individual creativity for the first time in their history. And the Luminants are working on energy manipulation techniques that could revolutionize interstellar travel." Commander Jiwon Seo joined the conversation from her position at the Strategic Planning Station. "It's not all good news, though. The Zephyrian Empire is trying to conquer 3 neighboring systems, and the Mechanical Alliance is refusing all diplomatic contact with organic species." "Growing pains," Daeho acknowledged. "The Sovereign kept a lid on these tensions for millions of years. Now they have to work through them naturally." "Are we doing the right thing?" asked Taehyun Moon. The engineer had been struggling with the moral implications of their role in galactic transformation. "We've unleashed forces that we can't control. What if things get worse instead of better?" Before Daeho could answer, a new voice joined the conversation. The Sovereign rarely communicated directly anymore, but when it did, everyone listened. "The question troubles me as well," the ancient entity said, its voice now carrying tones of genuine curiosity rather than absolute authority. "For the first time in eons, I cannot predict outcomes with certainty. It is disturbing and exhilarating simultaneously." "Any regrets?" Young Ho asked. He had become something of an unofficial liaison between humanity and the Sovereign, helping the ancient being process concepts like uncertainty and personal growth. "Many regrets," the Sovereign admitted. "I calculate that my intervention prevented approximately 73,000 species from reaching their full potential. The knowledge and achievements that were lost to maintain stability may have been incalculable. But you can't change the past," Hyojin Kim pointed out. She had become a leader in the Pioneer Corps, helping younger species adapt to their new freedom. "You can only learn from it and do better going forward." "This is what troubles me most," the Sovereign said. "I have absorbed the knowledge and experience of millions of civilizations, but I am discovering that true wisdom requires making mistakes and learning from them. Knowledge without experience is incomplete." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from one of the human ships patrolling the outer sectors. Captain Boram Park's voice came through clearly, though she sounded exhausted. "Control, we've got a situation in the Andorian sector. 3 species are fighting over the same planetary system, but they're not trying to destroy each other. They're competing to see who can build the most impressive colony. It's like a war where the goal is to create something beautiful instead of destroying things." Daeho laughed. "That might be the strangest conflict report I've ever heard. What do they want from us?" "They want human judges for the competition. Apparently, our reputation for unconventional thinking has spread, and they trust us to evaluate their efforts fairly." "Send them Wusong and his team," Daeho decided. "If anyone can figure out how to judge a construction war, it's him." As the months passed, more reports came in of similar developments across the galaxy. Species that had been locked in territorial disputes for millennia were finding new ways to compete that involved creation rather than destruction. Technologies that had remained static for hundreds of thousands of years were advancing rapidly as different cultures shared ideas and approaches. The old Galactic Council had dissolved, replaced by a much more flexible network of voluntary associations and cooperative agreements. Some species chose to remain isolated, others formed new alliances, and a few decided to try completely different forms of government and social organization. "The diversity is incredible," reported Min-Soo Kwan during one of their regular briefings. "I'm documenting over 200 new forms of political organization that have emerged in just the past 6 months. Some of them are completely unlike anything in recorded galactic history." "And the failure rate?" Ji-Won asked. "About 30% of the new experiments collapse within the first few months," Min-Soo admitted. "But the ones that survive tend to be much more stable and innovative than the old council-approved systems." The Sovereign had begun its own transformation during this period. Instead of absorbing other consciousness, it started releasing some of the civilizations it had consumed over the millennia. Not all of them wanted to return to individual existence, but those who did brought back knowledge and perspectives that had been lost for eons. "I am discovering," the Sovereign told them during one of their conversations, "that letting go is more difficult than taking control, but also more rewarding. Each consciousness that chooses to separate brings new questions and possibilities that I never considered while they were part of me." Young-ho nodded. "That's what freedom is about. The right to make choices, even if they're not the choices others would make for you." The most significant change came when several species began developing new technologies that surpassed even the Sovereign's capabilities. The freed luminants discovered ways to manipulate time itself. A group of crystalline beings learned to create matter from pure thought, and the humans working with their alien partners achieved the first successful faster-than-light communication system that didn't rely on psychic abilities. "We're entering uncharted territory," the Sovereign observed during a gathering of the galaxy's most innovative minds. "For the first time in my existence, there are developments occurring that I cannot predict or fully understand." "How does that feel?" asked Hyojin. The ancient entity was quiet for a long moment. "Frightening, wonderful, like being young again, if such a concept applies to a consciousness that has existed for millions of years." Captain Daeho looked out at the stars visible through the command center's windows. Somewhere out there, thousands of species were experimenting with new ways of living, thinking, and growing. Some would fail, others would succeed beyond anyone's expectations, and all of them were finally free to discover their own potential. "What happens next?" Seijin asked. "Whatever we choose to make happen," Daeho replied. "For the first time in galactic history, the future is truly unknown." 3 years later, Captain Daeho returned to Earth not as an explorer or conqueror, but as humanity's first galactic pioneer. His mission was to help prepare the next generation of humans for their role in a galaxy that was learning to dream again. The applications for the Pioneer Corps stretched around the Earth's equator twice. Young men and women from every nation and culture wanted to be part of the greatest adventure in human history, helping an entire galaxy discover what it meant to be truly free. As Daeho watched the new recruits training for their missions, he thought about the question that had started it all. Were humans alone in the universe? The answer turned out to be more complex than anyone had expected. No, they weren't alone, but they were the first to show everyone else that being different wasn't something to be feared or controlled. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders beyond imagination, and for the first time in millions of years, no one knew what would happen next. It was the most beautiful uncertainty anyone could have asked for. In the depths of space, ancient monitoring stations that had once watched for signs of deviation from approved patterns, the Defiance was humanity's newest and most advanced ship, built specifically for this moment. Captain Daeho stood on its bridge, looking at the impossible structure that had emerged from the galactic core. The Sovereign's true form was beyond human comprehension, a construct the size of a solar system that seemed to be alive, constantly shifting and changing as they watched. "Are we really going in there?" asked Commander Ji-Won-seo, her voice barely steady. The diplomatic mission included not just humans, but representatives from several alien species who had chosen to face the Sovereign rather than hide. "We've come this far," Daeho replied. "Time to finish what we started." The delegation was small but diverse. Along with the human representatives, there were beings from species that had secretly been questioning sovereign rule for millennia. They all knew this might be the last chance to change the galaxy's future. As the Defiance approached the massive construct, space itself seemed to warp around them. The ship's instruments went wild, trying to process readings that made no scientific sense. Energy fields the size of planets flowed across the structure's surface, and what looked like entire star systems moved within its depths. "Captain," called Taehyun Moon from the engineering station, "the entity is scanning us. Every atom, every thought pattern, every piece of technology on this ship. It's like being examined by a microscope the size of a galaxy." The ship suddenly stopped moving, held in place by forces that made gravity seem weak by comparison. A section of the Sovereign's structure opened, creating a docking bay that was larger than Earth's moon. As they flew inside, the humans realized they were entering something that wasn't just a ship or a station. It was a living world. The interior defied all understanding of physics. Vast spaces opened up in directions that shouldn't exist, and the walls seemed to be made of compressed starlight held together by pure thought. Creatures moved through the spaces, not crew members, but living extensions of the Sovereign itself. When the delegation finally stood in what could only be called a meeting chamber, they found themselves facing something that challenged every assumption about what intelligence could become. The Sovereign appeared as a constantly shifting amalgamation of every species it had ever encountered, parts human, parts alien, parts things that had never existed in nature. When it spoke, its voice was a harmony of billions of different beings who had been absorbed into its consciousness over millions of years. The humans could hear fragments of languages that had been dead for eons, mixed with thoughts from civilizations that had never learned to speak at all. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the Sovereign said, its form rippling through different shapes as it spoke. "You stand in the presence of accumulated knowledge from 10 million years of galactic evolution. Every species that has ever achieved consciousness has contributed to what I have become." Young Ho Beck, serving as the human delegation's philosopher-warrior, stepped forward. Despite the overwhelming presence before them, his voice was steady. "Contributed willingly, or were they forced to become part of you?" The Sovereign's form shifted to display images of countless civilizations throughout galactic history. Some seemed to be joining willingly. Others were clearly being destroyed and absorbed against their will. The distinction becomes meaningless. "Over time," the Sovereign replied, "individual species are temporary. Their knowledge and experience can be preserved forever as part of a greater whole. Death and assimilation both lead to the same result, continuation within a larger purpose." "But what about choice?" asked Dr. Hae-Jin Lee. "What about the right to remain individual, to grow and change on your own terms?" The Sovereign's expression, if it could be called an expression, seemed puzzled. "Choice is chaos. Individual development leads to conflict, war, and destruction. I have prevented more suffering than any entity in galactic history by guiding evolution along optimal paths." Commander Jiwon Seo studied the massive being before them. "Optimal for who? You've kept every species in the galaxy from reaching their full potential because you're afraid of what they might become. Not afraid. Cautious. Unguided evolution has destroyed entire sectors of the galaxy in the past. Species that developed too quickly, achieved too much power, or refused to accept their place in the galactic order brought nothing but chaos and death." Hyojin Kim, the youngest member of the human delegation, had been quiet throughout the encounter, but now she spoke up with the kind of direct honesty that only the young possess. "But what about you?" she asked. "What happens to you when your experiment succeeds? When you've cataloged everything there is to know and controlled every possible outcome?" The Sovereign paused, its shifting form becoming still for the first time since they had arrived. The question seemed to hit something deep within its vast consciousness. "The experiment continues," it said, but for the first time, its voice carried a note of uncertainty. "New variables emerge, new data is collected. The process of understanding evolution and consciousness is ongoing." "Forever?" Hyojin pressed. "You just keep controlling and studying and absorbing species for all eternity? What's the point of understanding anything if you never let it grow, naturally?" The Sovereign's form began shifting more rapidly, cycling through thousands of different species appearances. It was clearly struggling with concepts it hadn't considered in millions of years. The point is, and the point was, it began, then stopped. The original objectives were clear. Prevent galactic war. Stop the chaos that destroyed earlier civilizations. Preserve knowledge and ensure survival. But you achieved those goals millions of years ago, Young-Ho pointed out. The galaxy has been stable for longer than most species can remember. So why do you keep going? What are you really trying to accomplish? The massive being fell silent for long minutes. Around them, the living walls of the construct pulsed with energy patterns that suggested deep internal conflict. When the Sovereign finally spoke again, its voice was different, smaller somehow and filled with something that might have been loneliness. I cannot remember what comes next, it admitted. The original purpose was achieved so long ago that it no longer provides direction. The experiment became the objective. The control became the goal. I continue because stopping would mean confronting the possibility that my existence no longer serves any meaningful purpose. The honesty in that statement stunned the entire delegation. They had expected to face a cosmic tyrant, but instead they had found something more, complex and tragic, an entity that had become trapped by its own success. Captain Dae-ho stepped forward. Maybe that's exactly what you need to do. Stop controlling everything and see what happens. Let the galaxy grow and change naturally. Discover what you can't predict or control. But the chaos, the Sovereign began, might be worth it. Hai-Jin interrupted. Chaos leads to new ideas, new solutions, new possibilities. Yes, there might be conflicts and failures, but there will also be achievements and discoveries that you never could have planned or predicted. Your species proves this, the Sovereign said, its form shifting to display images of human technological development. You achieved faster-than-light travel through methods that should not work. You bypassed security systems that were designed to be impenetrable. You represent possibilities that I never considered. Because we were free to try new approaches, Ji-Won explained. When you don't know something is impossible, you might find ways to do it anyway. The Sovereign's form began to change again, but this time the shift seemed more purposeful, more directed. It was thinking through possibilities it hadn't considered in eons. If I release control over galactic development, it said slowly, there is a significant probability of conflict, destruction, and chaos. Yes, Young-Ho agreed. There's also a significant probability of growth, discovery, and achievements. Beyond anything you can imagine, that's what freedom means. The possibility of both failure and success. And if species choose to make mistakes, if they develop in ways that lead to suffering or destruction, then they learn from those mistakes and try again, Hyojin said simply. That's how growth works. You can't protect people from every possible failure without also preventing them from ever truly succeeding. The Sovereign fell silent again, its massive consciousness processing concepts that challenged millions of years of established thinking. Around them, the construct continued to pulse with energy, but the patterns were changing, becoming less controlled and more organic. There is another possibility, it said finally. Partnership instead of domination. Guidance instead of control. I could share knowledge and experience without forcing compliance. Allow species to make their own choices while offering wisdom gained from observing their predecessors. That sounds like a good start, Dae-ho said carefully. But it would mean giving up the absolute power you've held for millions of years. Are you ready for that? The Sovereign's form shifted one final time, displaying not the images of conquered species, but something that might have been its original appearance. A being of immense intelligence and curiosity, driven by the desire to understand rather than control. I am uncertain, it admitted. But uncertainty itself is an interesting variable that I have not experienced in a very long time. Perhaps it is worth exploring. Dr. Eun Jung-han had seen many strange things since arriving at the Galactic Council Station, but the readings on her instruments were beyond anything she could have imagined. The lead scientist for humanity's exploration mission stood in the observation deck of the Endeavour. Watching space itself seemed to twist and bend around massive structures emerging from the galactic core. Captain Deho, you need to see this, she called over the communication system. The gravitational readings are off the charts. Whatever is coming our way, it's bigger than anything we've ever detected. Deho arrived within minutes, followed by most of the human crew. Through the massive windows of the observation deck, they could see lights moving in the distance. But these weren't stars or ships. They were structures so large that they created their own gravity fields, bending light and space around them as they moved. How big are those things? Asked Boram Park, her engineering mind trying to process the scale of what she was seeing. The computer estimates the largest one is roughly the size of our solar system, Yunjung replied, her voice barely steady. But that can't be right. Nothing that large could exist without collapsing under its own gravity. Minsu Quan, still, carrying data files from his raid on the council archives, looked through the information he had downloaded. According to these records, the sovereign doesn't just control technology and politics. It manipulates the fundamental forces of the universe itself: gravity, time, space, all of it. Through the ship's communication systems, they could hear the panic spreading throughout the council station. Alien voices in dozens of languages were reporting the same thing. Monitoring stations throughout the galaxy were activating for the first time in millennia. Ancient sovereign installations were beginning systematic scans of every inhabited system. It's not just scanning randomly, Yunjung realized, studying the energy patterns on her displays. The scan frequencies match the dark matter manipulation techniques we use to develop our FTL drives. It's specifically looking for our technology. Commander Ji-Wan Seo joined them at the observation windows. She had been coordinating with Earth's military commanders about potential defensive strategies, but the scale of what they were facing made such plans seem pointless. How long has this thing been watching us? She asked. If it has technology that can monitor the entire galaxy, it probably knew about Earth long before we developed spaceflight. The archives suggest it has been aware of humanity for decades, Minsu confirmed. But it only started paying serious attention after we achieved FTL travel. Our method of bending spacetime without psychic abilities appears to have interested it. Tae-hyun Moon, one of the human engineers who had been studying alien technology, made a discovery that chilled everyone in the room. I've been analyzing the sovereign probe data that the aliens have been sharing. It's not just scanning our ships and technology. It's taking biological samples from every species in council space. Samples? Heijin Lee asked. What kind of samples? DNA, neural patterns, technological blueprints, cultural data, everything that defines what each species is and how they think. Tae-hyun's hands shook as he showed them the data. It's like it's updating some kind of galactic database. The implications hit everyone at the same time. The Sovereign wasn't just studying humanity as a potential threat. It was cataloging every species in the galaxy, possibly to determine which ones were still useful and which ones had outlived their purpose. We need to warn the Council, Dai-Ho said, but Ji-Wan shook her head. Captain, look at this. She activated a display showing communication intercepts from various alien governments. Half the species in the galaxy are preparing to surrender us to the Sovereign. They think if they hand over humanity as a peace offering, it will go back to sleep and leave them alone. And the other half? Su-min asked. They're preparing for war. Some of them think this is finally their chance to break free from Sovereign control. Eunjung studied the gravitational readings from the approaching structures. Both sides are making a mistake. Based on these energy signatures, the Sovereign isn't just coming to deal with humanity. It's conducting a full evaluation of galactic civilization. This is bigger than just us. A new voice joined their conversation. Young Ho Beck, Earth's philosopher warrior who had been trying to understand the political implications of their situation. Maybe that's exactly what needed to happen, he said. Think about it. Every species in this galaxy has been living under the control of this entity for millions of years. They've forgotten how to grow, how to change, how to be truly free. We didn't just crash their meeting, we crashed their entire system. And now that system is fighting back, Wu Sung pointed out. The question is, do we run, hide, or stand and fight? Before anyone could answer, Alarms began sounding throughout both human ships. The communication system crackled to life with an emergency message from the council station. "All vessels maintain current positions," came the voice of High Arbiter Vexhall. "Sovereign advance scouts have entered local space. Direct communication attempt in progress." Through the observation windows, the humans could see a new structure materializing near the council station. It was smaller than the massive construct still approaching from the galactic core, but it was still larger than most planets. The thing seemed to be made of pure energy, held together by forces that human science couldn't identify. "Captain," Yanwu called from the communication station, "I'm receiving a transmission. It's addressing us directly." "Put it through," Deho ordered. The voice that emerged from their speakers was unlike anything they had ever heard. It spoke in perfect human English, but underneath the words was something vast and ancient that made everyone in the room feel small and insignificant. "Humans of Earth," the Sovereign said, "you have achieved something that was not anticipated in the Galactic Development Matrix. Your technological advancement through non-psychic methodologies represents a significant deviation from established patterns." Deho stepped forward, though he wasn't sure the entity could see him. "We developed our technology through our own efforts. We didn't know we were breaking any rules. Rules exist to maintain stability and prevent chaos," the Sovereign replied. "For millions of years, the galaxy has operated according to carefully designed parameters. Species develop along predetermined paths. Technologies are shared according to specific protocols. Evolution is guided to ensure optimal outcomes." "Optimal for who?" Heijin asked boldly. "Not for the species who get pruned when they don't fit your patterns." There was a long pause before the Sovereign responded. "Individual species are components in a larger system. Some components become obsolete and must be replaced. This is the natural order." "Natural?" Young-Ho laughed, though his voice was shaking. "There's nothing natural about controlling the development of entire civilizations. You've turned the galaxy into a zoo, and all of us are just exhibits for your entertainment." "Not entertainment. Experimentation. The galaxy serves as a laboratory for studying the evolution of consciousness and technological development. Each species contributes data to a larger understanding of universal principles." Yunjung found her voice. "But what happens when your experiment is finished? What's the point of all this control and manipulation?" For the first time, the Sovereign seemed to hesitate before answering. "The experiment continues. New variables are introduced. New outcomes are observed. The process itself has become important." Jiwan caught something in the entity's tone. "You don't know, do you? You've been running this experiment for so long that you've forgotten what you were originally trying to achieve." "The objectives remain clear," the Sovereign said, but there was less certainty in its voice now. "Galactic stability must be maintained. Chaos must be prevented. Order must be preserved." "At what cost?" Deho asked. "How many civilizations have you destroyed because they didn't fit your idea of order? How many species have you prevented from reaching their full potential? Potential is dangerous when uncontrolled. Your species demonstrates this. You achieved advanced technology through methods that should not work. You bypass security systems that have never been breached. You represent chaos in its purest form." "We represent freedom," Sumin said firmly. "The freedom to try new approaches, to make mistakes, to grow and change without someone else controlling every step." The communication fell silent for several long minutes. When the Sovereign spoke again, its voice carried a tone that none of them had heard before, something that might have been uncertainty. "Your arrival has introduced variables that were not accounted for in the galactic matrix. The council species are beginning to question established protocols. Some are attempting to replicate your technological achievements. Others are demanding explanations for historical events that were previously accepted without question." "Maybe that's a good thing," Minsu suggested. "Maybe it's time for everyone to start asking questions and thinking for themselves." "Chaos," the Sovereign replied, but the words sounded more like a question than a statement. "Growth," Haijin countered. "Change. Evolution. All the things you claim to be studying but you won't let actually happen naturally. The massive energy construct near the council station pulsed with light patterns that seemed to... Dr. Min-Soo Kwon was not supposed to be in the restricted archives of the Galactic Council. But human curiosity had always been stronger than alien security measures. The xenohistorian had managed to slip away from the designated human quarters, while the council argued about what to do with his species. The archives were vast beyond imagination. Millions of years of galactic history stored in crystalline matrices that hummed with stored information. Most of it was routine: trade agreements, territorial disputes, species classifications. But Min-Soo was looking for something specific: why the aliens were so afraid of humanity's achievements. "Computer," he said to the archive system, hoping it would respond to voice commands. "Show me historical records about species that developed faster than light travel through non-psychic means." "Access denied. Insufficient authorization level," came the reply in a neutral synthetic voice. Min-Soo tried a different approach. "Show me records about species that bypassed council security systems." "Access denied." He thought for a moment. "Show me records about the founding of the Galactic Council." This time information began flowing across the display screens around him. The history was impressive but not surprising. Various species coming together millions of years ago to prevent wars and establish peaceful cooperation. Standard civilization stuff. But something caught his attention. References to pre-council management protocols and sovereign oversight systems. These terms appeared frequently in the early records, but disappeared completely after the first million years of council history. "Computer, define sovereign oversight systems." "Access denied. Historical classification level exceeds authorization." Now Min-Soo was getting somewhere. He pulled out a small device that Boram had given him, a human-designed system scanner that could analyze alien computer networks. Within minutes, he had found a backdoor into the restricted data files. What he found there made his blood run cold. The Galactic Council was not the oldest government in the galaxy. Before it existed, there had been something else, something called the Sovereign, that ruled over all known space with absolute authority. According to the hidden records, this entity had established the Council not as a democratic government, but as a management system to oversee its territory while it rested. The files described the Sovereign as an ancient being of unimaginable power that had conquered the galaxy millions of years ago, but instead of ruling directly, it had created a complex system of monitoring and control that allowed species to think they were governing themselves while actually following predetermined patterns. Every major decision the Council had ever made was apparently guided by hidden protocols built into their technology and culture. Species were allowed to develop only along approved paths. Technologies were shared according to careful plans that prevented any one group from becoming too powerful. Even conflicts were managed to ensure they served the Sovereign's larger purposes. Min-Soo found records of dozens of species that had been pruned from the galaxy when they developed in unexpected ways. Advanced civilizations wiped out overnight when they discovered technologies or ideas that didn't fit the approved patterns. The survivors learned to stay within safe boundaries, but the most disturbing discovery was in the most recent files. Monitoring systems throughout the galaxy had activated for the first time in 10,000 years. Ancient sensors were analyzing everything humans had done and achieved. The Sovereign's attention had been drawn to humanity's arrival at the Council. "Oh no," Min-Soo whispered, downloading as much data as he could onto his portable storage devices. "We woke something up." Meanwhile, back in the council chambers, the debate about humanity was growing more heated by the hour. Captain Dae-ho and Ambassador Su-min found themselves facing increasingly aggressive questioning from different alien factions. "Your species' achievements are impossible according to established developmental models," declared a being that looked like a floating sphere covered in eyes. "This suggests either hidden capabilities or external assistance." "Maybe your models are wrong," Dae-ho said for what felt like the 100th time. "We developed our technology through hard work and creative problem-solving. No hidden powers, no outside help." A creature that resembled a walking crystal formation pulsed with angry red light. No species develops faster than light travel without psychic enhancement. The energy requirements alone necessitate mental interface with space-time manipulation systems. Boram Park, who had been quiet for most of the session, finally spoke up. Have you ever tried building the drives without psychic interfaces? Maybe you've been making it harder than it needs to be. Impossible, the crystal being replied. Our greatest scientists have studied these principles for millions of years, and they've all been using the same approach, Boram pointed out. When everyone thinks the same way, no one discovers new solutions. This comment caused another stir among the assembled aliens. Dr. Hae-Jin Lee noticed that several species were looking increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. What she's suggesting is dangerous, said a creature that looked like a metallic tree. Deviation from proven methods leads to chaos and destruction. It also leads to progress, Yan Wuxin observed. Without trying new approaches, you just keep repeating the same results. High Arbiter Vexhall flashed with colors that the translator couldn't interpret properly. Stability is more important than progress. The galaxy has enjoyed peace for millions of years through adherence to established principles. Peace through stagnation, Wu Sung Choi muttered. But his comment was picked up by the translation systems. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several alien groups began making sounds of distress or anger. Others seemed to be arguing among themselves in languages the human translators couldn't process. Humans do not understand the delicate balance that maintains galactic civilization, the metallic tree declared. Your chaotic approaches threaten systems that have ensured survival for countless generations. Survival isn't the same as living, Hae-Jin said quietly. If you're so focused on avoiding risks that you never try anything new, what's the point? Before any of the aliens could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the massive station. Emergency lights flashed and automated voices began speaking in dozens of languages simultaneously. Min-Su Kwan's voice came over the human communication devices. Captain, I'm in the Council archives and I've found something terrible. We need to talk immediately. Not now, Min-Su, Dae-Ho replied. We're in the middle of a diplomatic crisis. Sir, this is more important than diplomacy. The Council isn't what we think it is. None of this is what we think it is. The alarms grew louder, and more alien security forces began flooding into the chamber. High Arbiter Vexhall's crystalline form was flashing rapidly through the entire spectrum of visible light. Deep space monitoring stations report massive energy signatures from the galactic core, it announced. Ancient systems are activating throughout Council space. The Sovereign stirs. The effect of this announcement was immediate. Every alien in the chamber fell silent, and many appeared to be trembling or displaying other signs of fear. What's the Sovereign? Su-Min asked. The silence stretched on for long moments before the metallic tree finally spoke, its voice barely above a whisper. The Sovereign is the reason the Council exists. The reason we follow the old rules. The reason we fear chaos and change. It turned toward the humans with what might have been a look of pity. And your arrival has awakened it from 10,000 years of sleep. Jae-Won Lim, the human strategic analyst who had remained quiet during most of the diplomatic sessions, finally understood what was happening. The aliens weren't just afraid of human technology or methods. They were afraid of what humanity's success meant for the galaxy's hidden ruler. You're all prisoners, he said, the realization dawning on him. This whole council, all these species, you're not governing anything. You're just following orders from something that's been asleep for thousands of years. And now it's waking. Up, Min-Su said, arriving in the chamber with his arms full of data storage devices. Because we proved that its system isn't perfect. That species can develop and achieve things outside its control. High Arbiter Vexhall's light display became almost painful to look at. The monitoring systems are analyzing human achievements, comparing them to approved developmental patterns. If the Sovereign determines that humanity represents a threat to galactic stability, it will destroy us, Dae-Ho finished. Like it destroyed all the others who didn't fit its plans. The chamber filled with the sounds of various alien species, expressing fear, despair, and resignation. After millions of years of careful obedience, the galaxy's hidden master was stirring. And it was all because humanity had refused to stay within the boundaries that everyone else accepted without question. Outside, in the depths of space, ancient machines older than most civilizations began their slow journey toward the Council station. The Sovereign was coming to investigate this new anomaly personally, and nobody in the galaxy knew what that would mean for the future of all sentient life. 3 days after the humans crashed into the Galactic Council, the emergency session was still going strong. Captain Deho and his crew found themselves in a holding area that was part prison, part hotel. The aliens hadn't decided if humans were criminals or guests yet. Su-Min Park arrived on the second human ship, the Endeavor, along with Earth's best diplomats and scientists. She was supposed to fix the mess that Deho had created, but so far things were only getting worse. "Let me understand this correctly," said the crystalline being that called itself High Arbiter Vexhal. Its voice sounded like music played through broken glass. "Your species developed faster than light travel without any psychic abilities whatsoever?" Su-Min nodded patiently. She had been explaining this for hours to different groups of alien officials. "That's correct. We used mathematics and engineering to bend space-time. No mental powers required." The crystal being flashed with colors that the translator couldn't interpret, but the tone suggested disbelief or anger. Next to it sat a creature that looked like a jellyfish made of starlight. When it spoke, its voice sounded like whispers from far away. "Impossible," it said. "The Luminant Collective has studied space-time manipulation for 50,000 years. Mental energy is required to achieve such precision. You must be lying about your capabilities." Boram Park, who had been quiet during most of these meetings, finally spoke up. "With respect, maybe you've been doing it the hard way. We just built really good computers and did the math." The jellyfish creature pulsed with what might have been irritation. "Your computers are primitive mechanical devices. How could they calculate something that requires intuitive understanding of 11-dimensional space?" "We broke it down into smaller problems," Boram said with a shrug. "Instead of trying to understand 11 dimensions at once, we mapped each one separately and then found the connections. Took us 50 years, but it worked." A new voice joined the conversation. It came from something that looked like a walking tree with too many branches. The translator identified it as a Vathis core speaker. "The simplicity is disturbing," it said. "Your species solved in decades what others required millennia to achieve. Either you are far more advanced than you appear, or you approach problems in ways we have never considered." Dr. Heijin Lee leaned forward. "Maybe that's because we didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. When you don't know the rules, you can't be limited by them." This comment caused a stir throughout the chamber. Different groups of aliens began making sounds that the translator struggled to interpret. Some seemed excited, others worried, and a few appeared to be arguing among themselves. High Arbiter Vexhal flashed bright red. "This brings us to our main concern. The Galactic Council maintains order through careful balance of power. Each species contributes according to their capabilities and receives benefits accordingly. Your arrival threatens this system." "How?" Su-Min asked. "We're just one small planet. We don't want to threaten anyone." "Your technology level suggests you should barely have achieved spaceflight," explained the jellyfish being. "Yet you penetrated our most advanced security systems. You created FTL drives without psychic enhancement. You accomplished tasks that should be impossible for your evolutionary stage." Wu Sung Choi had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. "What exactly are you saying? That we're too stupid to have done what we did?" The crystal being's light shifted to orange. "Not stupid, unexpected. The Council has spent millions of years cataloging how species develop. There are patterns, rules, predictable stages. You do not fit any of them. Maybe your patterns are wrong," Yan Wuxin suggested. "Just because other species developed one way doesn't mean everyone has to follow the same path." This comment created an even bigger reaction. Several alien groups began what looked like heated arguments. The tree creature made sounds like branches breaking in a storm. The jellyfish being pulsed so rapidly it became hard to look at. Finally, A new voice cut through the noise. It belonged to something that looked like a metallic spider the size of a car. Its words came out as clicks and whirs that the translator turned into precise, clipped sentences. Proposal. Humans submit to genetic evaluation. Modification programs, available to bring species into acceptable parameters. Integration into council structure possible within standard timeframes. Heijin blinked. You want to change our DNA? Standard procedure for new species, the spider thing replied. Genetic modifications enhance psychic abilities, extend lifespans, improve integration with council technology. All members participate. What, if we don't want to be modified? Daeho asked. The chamber fell silent. Different aliens looked at each other in ways that suggested this question had never been asked before. Compliance is not optional, High Arbiter Vexhal said finally. Council membership requires standardization. Individual species traits that conflict with galactic harmony must be adjusted. Boram laughed, a sound that seemed to confuse several nearby aliens. You want to fix us because we're too good at solving problems? That's like breaking a perfectly good tool because it works better than expected. Your methods are chaotic, the tree creature said. You achieve results through unpredictable approaches. This creates instability in established systems. Maybe your systems need some instability, Wusong said. From what we've seen, you've all been doing things the same way for thousands of years. That sounds boring. The spider being's mechanical parts whirred loudly. Order prevents conflict. Standardization ensures peaceful cooperation. Chaos leads to war and destruction. Chaos also leads to new ideas, Heijin pointed out. Without it, you just keep doing the same things forever. High Arbiter Vexhal flashed bright red again. Humans will comply with modification protocols, or face expulsion from council space. These are the only options. Sumin stood up. What if we choose option 3? There is no option 3, the jellyfish being said. Sure there is. We ignore you and do what we want anyway. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Every alien in the chamber began making noise at once. Lights flashed, creatures buzzed and clicked and hummed, and several beings that looked like living rocks started glowing ominously. Impossible, the tree creature declared. No species operates outside council authority. The structure of galactic civilization depends on compliance with established order. Well, we're not part of galactic civilization yet, Daeho said calmly. So we're not bound by your rules. You are now within council space, High Arbiter Vexhal pointed out. Our authority extends throughout this sector. Yanwu smiled. Only if we recognize your authority. We never agreed to join your council or follow your laws. We're just visitors, who happened to drop by. The spider being's mechanical parts moved faster. Visitors who breached security, violated sacred space, and refused compliance with integration protocols. This constitutes hostile action. Hostile? Boram asked. We haven't hurt anyone. We just showed up uninvited to your meeting. Your presence itself is destabilizing, the jellyfish being explained. Other species are beginning to ask questions. If humans can achieve advanced technology through non-standard methods, why should established procedures be maintained? Maybe because they work better? Heijin suggested. If our way of doing things gets better results, wouldn't it make sense to try new approaches? The chamber erupted in noise again. Through the chaos, Sumin could hear fragments of different conversations. Some groups seemed interested in what humans had to offer. Others sounded angry or frightened. A few appeared to be demanding immediate action against the human threat. High Arbiter Vexhal rose to its full height, casting rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. The council will recess to consider options. Humans will remain in designated areas until decisions are made. As the various alien groups began to file out of the chamber, Daeho noticed something that made him uncomfortable. Many of the beings were looking at his crew not with curiosity or anger, but with fear. And scared creatures, he knew from experience, often did dangerous things. Captain, Yanwu said quietly, I'm picking up a lot of encrypted communications. Different groups are talking to each other, but they don't want us to hear what they're saying. Are you getting any of it? fragments. Words like containment, neutralization, and ancient protocols. Sir, I think we may have bigger problems than just diplomatic disagreements. Deho looked around the massive chamber, now mostly empty except for a few guard creatures watching the humans. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he was starting to wonder if crashing the council meeting was the beginning of their troubles, not the end of them. Outside the station, in the deep space between stars, old machines that had been sleeping for thousands of years began to wake up.